thing my head wasn't down there. I've finally chosen a differential to use, and I really didn't trust my own experience with adjusting it, so I sent it off and had it adjusted properly. Now it's back. It's incredibly tight. I hope that it's not too tight. Perhaps the reason it's as tight as it is when they heat up, they expand a little bit and it will run a little smoother. But I'm going to hope that he knows what he's doing, and I'm going to put it back together. So I bought two gaskets, not necessarily for the same differential, but in case this one didn't prove to be proper, I was going to be able to pull it out and not have to worry about getting another gasket. So we'll see if this stuff has plugged up. This differential was leaking. One of the reasons why I decided to rebuild this vehicle. I had it practically encased in silicone on the bottom to keep the bottom half of the differential, or at least the floor of the garage, dry. But it never really worked very well. So I'm hoping that this rebuild with the proper gasket will solve that problem. Sets up fairly quickly. Now we make sure that we get it in the right way around. Actually, I think it will only fit one way. Right, now, lock washers. I'm hoping that this changeover to this particular differential will make a difference in the highway speed and RPM speed of this car. That was one of the other reasons that I decided to redo the vehicle, is because of the fact that it revs so high on the highway. So this is the other differential. This is not the one that was originally in it. Okay, there's a nice bead of gook squished out, so hopefully that will solve the leaking problems. Now, we're going to put the half shaft in, or the axles, but the backing plates have to go on in that same process. So just slide this down a little bit, and we'll put the right end in first. It took me a minute to figure out how to get the positioning of these plates correct. Then we put the backing plate on, and then the half shaft goes in right behind it. I'm just going to put a bolt in here to hold this in position. There's an oil seal bearing in this area. And then we have to try and hit the differential spider gear on the inside. Okay, another bits of poetry in motion here. Let's see if we can get some bolts in. And we'll tighten these up. Maybe wipe some of that excess goop off. And we'll torque this. The company that makes this stuff must love me for wasting a lot of it. I'm going to try not to make quite as big a mess on this one as I did on the last one. A little bit of a fishing trip to get it in. These wedges, I'm going to just put a little bit of grease on them and slide them into their hole. They're the adjusting wedges to set up the brakes, unlike disc brakes that automatically adjust. Early drums, at least on British cars, required an adjustment from time to time as the brake pads wore. There's not much point in replacing these because they're virtually new. Now that fits over top of that. Stretch it out. This is where the force comes into play. One spring appears to be a little stretched, so I stuck the other one on and it's working. I don't know if I can get another one of these or take this one and take a loop out of it, but so I think for now I'm going to put the drum on this side and do a rough adjustment. Oh yes, I forgot. These things have to be held in place by springs. So I better do that before I get ahead of myself. Put the spring seat and the spring, which has to be compressed, the other seat. See if we can do it this way. Yep, that's the first attempt. Second attempt. I think there's a tool for this. I hope I don't crush my thumb. And third attempt. There. That's one. I got one more to do on the other side, and then two more on the other brake. That last one wasn't so bad. Now we're going to put the brake drum on. Let's make sure it's sort of semi-centered here. Yeah, not too bad. These are held on by one screw, which I put back into the axle to keep it in place. Now we're going to do a little rough adjustment on this brake on the shoes. First, I'm going to tighten this wedge all the way up to seat the brake shoes. Well, they're locked now, so we'll just go a little, yeah, and we'll back it off a couple. And this is just a rough. They won't actually get seated properly until there's hydraulic fluid pushing on them. I kind of messed up a little bit on that one brake. I got the shoes reversed. So the leading shoe was on the bottom and the other one was on the top. There's a little metal plate that is attached to one shoe that allows the emergency brake arm to actuate against it. And that was all that was making up the difference for that shortened spring. So now I'm just going to fill this up with this gear oil, and the axle will be done. Well, it's turning a lot more smoother now than it was before there was any fluid in it. So hopefully it will not leak. The transmission looks almost exactly the same as the old one, but I'm discovering more and more as I get into it that it's not. I've had to cut an access on the bottom here to accommodate this plate. This caps off the counter shaft, and it's not on the other transmission, so I had to make a port on the bell housing to fit that. But not only that, I discovered that the bolts, the bolt pattern, 1, 2, 3, 4, are not exactly the same as on the other bell housing. So I've had to elongate the bottom 2 bolts to allow the bell housing to fit. I've done some rough testing on it, and now I'm going to see if it actually does fit. I just hope that there aren't any other more surprises. The fellow in England, when I said I was going to put the 5-speed in, said it's more trouble than it's worth. I'm beginning to believe him. I had to make a few modifications to the bell housing to accommodate that one socket that wasn't fitting quite well. And I forgot I have to take this slide off. This is for the release bearing, and attached this one, which is the concentric clutch release slave cylinder thingy. I don't know what's next, frankly. You know, it's I did do a rough test on the radiator and had some difficulty. I had to cut out a bracket that was crossing over from the left side or the right side of the front of the frame because the bottom of the radiator hit on it, and it wouldn't fit any other way. So I cut that out and had to elongate a couple of little mounting brackets at the bottom that also didn't fit very well. So it is very, very much a tailoring, a little snip, a little cut, a little nick, a little tuck. I had them leave the chassis unpunched for holes, such as the holes that will be needed for the steering rack, the hole that's going to be needed for the fuel filler, and so I've been experimenting with some ways of cutting these holes. I thought about a hole saw, but then I'd have to buy a whole batch of different sizes. Chassis punches, same problem. This torture device might work, although it looks fairly dangerous. And I had experimented a little bit. I punched this hole in the template that they sent me for the hood scoop, and I can still smell some of the smoke that came out of the drill. You don't want this thing going too fast because, frankly, these things are only held on by an Allen key, and I have visions of this thing flying off and through my chest and out the other side. So I'll probably be using my little plastic shield in order to help prevent some of that possible bodily injury. I have set the thing up. It does work. It's a little ragged, it'll need cleaning up, but this seems to be the best solution. I've backed up the location where the hole for the fuel filler is going. It's a one-shot deal. If I mess it up, you're going to hear some beeping going by on the audio track, but it's going to be covered by a rubber grommet. I've taken several measurements off of the old back panel. I'm more or less sure that it goes in this spot, but you know, they keep on saying measure twice, 3 times, 4 times, cut once. I've measured several times, and I'm hoping I've got it right. and I can't use that hole saw that I bought. It's the wrong size. So I have to resort to this ancient medieval torture device. So here goes. Nice and shiny. It's a little off center. There's some ragged edges I'm going to have to clean up, but thankfully this one has a grommet. Looks pretty good. As long as the hose fits the tank on the inside, we might as well check that now. Well, the positioning is correct. If anything, I could use a little longer hose. I've been putting off trimming back the foot box in order to accommodate the transmission, but the transmission's getting ready for a dry fit, so I guess I might as well flip it over and do some major cutting on that. I thought I was finished drilling pop rivets out. I have to trim this back quite a bit and redo another patch. Okay, it's still at 14 3/4. That should provide lots of clearance. I just have to make a patch to fill this hole, but now instead of a triangle, it's kind of a trapezoid, oblong, crappy shape. There was no way I was going to be absolutely sure that that plate was going to clear the transmission. So with the assistance of a couple of friends and a lot of wrestling, I decided to mock up the engine and transmission, drop it in the chassis to see whether or not it clears, and it doesn't clear. So I'm going to have to do some more trimming on that box. I guess I'll do the measurements while the tranny and the engine is in there, see if I can figure out a way. It's just too tight. It's so close. If the engine torques a little bit under acceleration, it's going to wear a hole in that foot box. So this is the only guaranteed way of making sure things fit, is to mock it up. You either mock it up or you screw it up. Okay, I believe we have enough clearance, finally. After trimming, grinding, fitting, and pushing, I managed to get the bell housing on this transmission. I had to grind out this bottom piece to accommodate that flange, and I put the concentric slave cylinder on, figuring I'm ahead of the game, until I tried to fit the hoses. This hose goes in the top. There's this big lump of aluminum here, and no matter what you do, it's not going to fit in there. The other one, no problem. It'll fit, more or less. I have a little bending to do on it, but it will fit. Now I know why the fella said it's more trouble than it's worth. I hope this works. I am about that far away from putting the old 4-speed back in. I've reattached the brake lines. I've reattached the emergency brake rod and cable. The brake line, the hose is attached. Now it's just a matter of sliding it very carefully into the chassis. The chassis is right on the ground. I put some tape on the bottom frame members to keep it from banging. So I'll just move it into the carpet area. And climb in, maybe. This is the Watts linkage, kind of like a control arm. Put the bolt in through the back. It's supposed to be mushroom shaped to prevent it from digging into the interior, but I haven't been able to find those kind of bolts anywhere. And once again, like the front, we're just going to locate stuff finger tight. I'm going to put the head end of the shocks in first. Got to take the nuts off that were packed with it. Pull off the top rubber mount. Slide it up. Oh, going from the bottom first. Up to the top. Slide those back on top. One nut for now, the other one just to keep it in position. Then we're going to rotate it so the adjuster points out the back. Now it's going to be quite a trick to get all of this lined up, especially seeing these shocks are always a little fatter than the portion of the axle that they have to fit into. So try coming in from the other side here. I'm going to put a little piece of tape down here on the axle so I don't damage the paint or the powder coating while I'm using it to pry to get this thing in position. So we're going to give it a little push. Come on. Excuse me, but this is the only way it's going to fit. Okay. Oops. Now there is a heim joint on the bottom of this A-bar, and it has to be held in place by a nut. And I'm going to put a washer on it this time to keep it from mushrooming the joint. Another dent in the frame. Discovering that aluminum is incredibly fragile. You can't even look at it without it picking up a ding. Okay, we're going to slip this underneath and attach it at these 2 points. I'll have to get the other side in first before I can drive that pin in any further. Surprise, surprise, surprise. There's nothing ever standard on this thing. Well, here, I'll show you. It's twisted and it's too wide. It needs to be shaved down. Okay, so much for that. Take two. Well, all I had to do was push the bushing in a little further, although some work that I had done to this thing, this A-bar, isn't exactly the perfect work because it is incredibly tight. So it's going to act almost like a torsion bar. I'll drift that pin in. These eyelets they used to be straight, but I had them bend a bar. And now I guess I better put a washer on the ends of these to help keep the bushing in place. I have to raise it up a bit so that it matches the height of this jack that I've got here. Once again, I'm cursed by powder coating. The bracket, which you can't see, is so tight. I had to drop the A bracket off, and now I'm going to have to shave all this powder coating out so I can get the heim joint in, and it's up on jack stands.